Welcome to the 35th anniversary of what is commonly called the greatest concert of all time. And why that is probably true, the reason why it became the greatest concert is because not just of the elevated performances of the artists, some of whom you're about to see, but because of the reason for having the concert in the first place and the reason for those elevated performances. I need to take you back to 1984 and remind some of you and those who weren't around then to tell you about why this happened and why it remains so powerful in memory in the first place. I'm Bob Geldof, the singer of the Boomtown Rats. And in late October 1984, I came home at about 6 o'clock in the evening and turned on the television to watch the television news. And I saw on the screen something that put my pathetic personal problems into a horrifying perspective. There in front of me were elegant men and women, mums and dads, holding their children, but they were hardly recognizable as humans at this point. They were just about alive. They had the swollen heads and the bloated stomachs of children who are dying of starvation. The thing is, you don't actually die of hunger. You die of a collapse of all your immune system so that you catch all sorts of diseases, but your muscles are so weakened that you can't even make a noise. And all these children were silently screaming at me in agony. To die of hunger is to die in complete agony. And here were these mothers and fathers in the last seconds of their children's lives in utter despair as to what to do. And these people stared at me in my pop star life in Chelsea and London. At the time, Margaret Thatcher was in power in Britain and Ronald Reagan was in power in America. It was a time where a sort of cult of money and individualism had developed. Margaret Thatcher famously said that there was no such thing as society. The movie Wall Street with Michael Douglas was a huge hit. His character, Gordon Gekko, says greed is good. This was the sort of sense of the time. Africa is 8 miles south of Europe. That's it. 8 miles south. Yet in our heads, it's a universe away. But 8 miles south of the richest continent in the world is the poorest. And in that poorest continent, 30 million people were about to die of starvation, of hunger. In our world, 8 miles north, we were producing surplus food. Worse, we were storing that surplus food. And more obscenely still, we then were destroying that surplus food. We are paying tax money to produce unnecessary surplus food. We are paying further tax money to store that unnecessary surplus food. And disgracefully, we are paying tax again to burn it or melt it down or whatever. 8 miles south of us, people were dying of hunger. To die of want in a world of surplus is not only intellectually absurd, it is economically illiterate, and it is, of course, morally repulsive. And so the next day I called my friend Midge Ure from Ultravox, and we thought we'd have enough time to put out a record at Christmas that would get enough money, maybe £100,000, to give to UNICEF or CARE or Oxfam or Save the Children. And that would be the most we could do, because it didn't seem to be enough simply to put $1 or €1 or £1 into some charity box. This was something pivotal and profound, the potential death of 30 million fellow human beings. Something of the self was required to stop this. And all I could do was write a few tunes. So Midge and I wrote the Band-Aid song, Do They Know It's Christmas? And rather than risk not having a hit with Ultravox, Midge's band, doing it, or the Boomtown Rats doing it, we got together all our friends from working in rock and roll for 10 years and got them to do the record. So this new gang, U2, had a singer called Bono, who I knew from Dublin, where I'm from also. Sting was a friend of mine, Duran, Boy George, George Michael, Spandau. All the kids of the 80s came And then in America, they saw what we were doing, and I got a call from Harry Belafonte and Michael Jackson, and they said that they were doing USA for Africa. Would I come over? And so there in that room was Dylan and Springsteen, Paul Simon, Willie Nelson, Stevie Wonder, Smokey Robinson, Ray Charles. The universe of music was in that room, and they did, of course, USA for Africa. And at that session, I thought, we can put these two bands together. We can put USA for Africa and Band Aid together and possibly do something with that. And that became Live Aid. And because of the successes of Band Aid and Live Aid, two of the greatest selling singles of all time, the whole world knew about this concert. And so the whole world tuned into it. 95% of all the television screens on earth. And so for the first time since maybe we as human beings left Africa 250,000 years ago, we were able to get in contact with each other through this new technology of satellites and televisions. And of course, like forever, the musicians were the Pied Pipers, gathering people around the electronic hearth of television, not to make a concert, not to play their, as we now know, deathless music, but to focus attention on people who are mute, who were silent, who had no voice other than the music that you're about to hear. And so the musicians somehow reached above themselves and reached out for nothing, for free. Of course, there was a sense of rivalry between the bands, which of course bands then play better. But no, there was something, an otherness to this great romantic day. But for us in Band Aid, and we work on this every day, I've just come to film this little intro, having talked to my colleagues, where we're now dealing with still poverty in Africa, the COVID crisis, where health facilities are far less there than in our world. And so still, 35 years later, we still do this every single day. This is after all the schools that have been built, after all the orphanages, after all the hospitals, after all the 650 trucks carrying food and the 12 ships carrying food that resulted from that day. But more than that, it was the beginning of a 20-year project. That ended in 2005 with Live 8, which we'll have another day, we'll have another anniversary for that. Live 8, Kofi Annan, the Secretary General of the United Nations, called it the Rubicon crossing moment between the North and the South, between the rich and the poor, between us and them. And that was where we shifted the politics. That's where the boys and girls with guitars and pianos finally wrote the political agenda and had it implemented. That began with the Band Aid record. It was a 20-year project. So for us working in this, it wasn't just that one singular great day, which remains so powerful in memory. And because it's powerful in memory, then 2 generations have been able to take this work forward. We were able to do the Band Aid 20 record with Radiohead and McCartney, of course, joined in as usual. Bowie joined in, Blur joined in, and then we did Band Aid 30, which of course was with a young Ed Sheeran, with a young Sam Smith, with a young all of those other people. And finally we ended with an even bigger concert than Live 8, which was 1,000 artists, but now with new technologies again, online television, AOL. We were able to do the G8 countries, the 8 capital cities, Paris, Moscow, London, Berlin, Tokyo, Rome, Philadelphia, like with Live Aid, and of course Johannesburg, linking Africa to us with Nelson Mandela and their artists. It worked. It's extraordinary to say that sometimes something in your life just works. Since the year 2000, we, and I mean everyone, have cut global extreme poverty by 50%. Poverty makes no sense. There's no need for it to exist. We've cut it by 50%. We've got another 50% to go, but we will get there. And one of the spurs to getting there, one of the ways that we know it's possible, is because of this concert that we're celebrating today, and because of the great performances by some of the greatest artists of all time. We've limited this little section to just 3 artists. with some clips in between that puts the whole thing in context. But I need you to understand that every time you go on YouTube, every time you click on one of these performances, every time you throw a link to one of your friends and they watch, then Band-Aid makes money. And that money almost instantaneously goes directly to the poorest people on the planet. So I need you watching this to once again galvanize yourself, encourage yourself, to link your friends into this so they watch, so that they engage, and so that we finally get rid of the scourge of poverty, and that we never, ever, ever, ever have to see again the images I was confronted with and that I showed my fellow artists 35 years ago. Enjoy Live Aid again, and let it live long in your memory, and let it be as powerful now as it was 35 years ago.